not sure. I wasn't told that there was any problem. Yes. Were they not provided at the time? Well, the paperwork. I'm sorry.
I can call the meeting to order, please. Mr. Clerk, it is 5:32. We are in Council Chambers for a Special General Committee 2016 Operating Budget Review meeting. Councillors, declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof, please. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda? And there was some changes that are suggested. Someone put that on the floor, please. Just in the order. Thank you, Councillor Kim. Second. Councillor Abel, comments or questions on the proposed agenda? All in favor? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. We'll move right to delegations. And could I have a motion, please, to waive procedural bylaw to allow both the CAO and the Treasurer an extra time to speak? Councillor Marakis, Councillor Abel. All in favor? Contrary? Thank you. Mr. Moore and Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very pleased this evening to introduce the proposed 2016 budget. I think the process this year is somewhat different than what has been before you in previous years. I think several months ago, Councillor Humphreys had suggested that we find a more straightforward way of communicating what the taxpayer can expect from a budget. Staff and Council, of course, are familiar with budgets and with all the jargon, but the taxpayer is not. So that is why we are presenting the budget in what I hope you will agree is a more direct and simplified manner. The format of the meeting will involve some brief comments from me, followed by the Treasurer, Dan Elliott, and then the department heads. As always, I would encourage members of Council and the public to contact department heads with any questions regarding the budget proposal. I am equally pleased to advise that the proposed budget contains the resources necessary to deliver on Council's plans and priorities for 2016, all at the target given to us through by way of a very modest increase of 1.8% over the 2015 budget. This proposed amount matches the lowest increase following the collapse of the markets in 2008 and is the lowest tax increase in the last 13 years. This was accomplished in large part because of the improvements you made in the budget process over the past year. I was asked to examine some of the processes currently employed by the town, including the manner in which Council develops your annual budget. I have observed some very good work that has been underway regarding the budget process already. The establishment of the Finance Advisory Committee and the development of specific budget principles were two very worthwhile initiatives undertaken by Council this past year. I've observed that Council has thought about the future by developing a 10-year capital investment plan. You now know where the growth-related needs are for the next 10 years by matching your official plan with your infrastructure plan. With that in place, you know that approximately $187 million will be required over the next 10 years to fund the needs of Aurora. Council also now has an asset management plan. You've cataloged every road, culvert, park, building, established their condition, assigned a dollar value to all of your assets, and most importantly, created a financial plan complete with a cash flow analysis to ensure that your infrastructure is in a state of good repair and that you will have the funds available to do that important work. You have an up-to-date development charge bylaw, which is key to ensuring that growth, for the most part, pays for growth. In short, you are well ahead of the curve when compared to most municipalities in the province of Ontario. Having said all of this, you can always continually improve things. After reviewing last year's budget process, I recommended that this year we begin the exercise by seeking a clear direction from Council in the late summer regarding the establishment of a budget target. It is always easier to achieve a goal when there's a clear understanding of what that goal is. And while I'm not suggesting that this has been the past practice in Aurora, I've observed many municipalities approach the budget in quite a different way, more as a contest. Staff provide an optimistic wish list, which is well beyond inflation, and council then believe it's their role to reduce their proposal, usually following a line-by-line review. There are consequences to this type of process. It takes time, and frankly sets up the budget as a negotiation, complete with often with conflict and drama. It is my experience this type of process is unproductive and inefficient. The solution is to remove the elements of confrontation, clearly recognize that council sets the direction, establishes policy, and it's staff job to assist council by implementing your plans and policies. So this year we changed the process, and council provided clear direction. A budget target was established, a 1.8% increase, which is approximately $6.20 per $100,000 of residential assessment. So a home assessed by MPAC at $500,000 would pay, if this budget is approved, an additional $31 more per year for Town of Aurora services. So again, a house assessed at $500,000 would pay $31.02 per year of additional taxes to the Town of Aurora for Aurora services. This direction was exceedingly helpful and helped focus the discussion that the Treasurer and I had with each of your department heads over the past several months. Your department heads worked very hard to meet a target that was challenging but realistic, a target that needed to achieve certain outcomes as approved and suggested by Council. So those outcomes were as follows. Number one, obviously the budget had to be balanced. The budget will balance itself. Sorry, I've been waiting 84 days to say that. I'm sorry. It had to be a balanced budget. Secondly, we had to maintain and where possible improve service. No, I maintain and where possible improve service levels. Thirdly, continue to place money in reserves to recognize that your infrastructure will require replacement and renewal in the future. Fourthly, a reduced reliance on hydro interest and supplementary taxes. Number five, increased funding to fire prevention and emergency services, a vital and important core service available to residents of Aurora. And finally, you've challenged staff to continue to look for ways of using resources more efficiently. These council directions provided at the beginning of the budget process was not only helpful to the budget process, but it set the tone for the conversation and discussions the Treasurer and I had with your department heads. I wanted to discuss briefly the last point, the notion of using our resources more efficiently. Excuse me. The cost of human resources is a significant portion of the operating budget. Adding to the full-time staff complement obviously increases costs, and in my view, should always be viewed as a last resort. Council and senior management have taken important steps to control labor costs recently. The establishment of the vacancy control program several months ago formalizes the process or the thoughts that go into determining how staff resources are to be applied. Now, a vacancy can only be filled with the consent of the CAO after reviewing a report from the operating budget. The underlying principle is that vacancies will not automatically be filled, and a vacancy becomes an opportunity to consider if the service could be delivered differently, perhaps combined with other duties, changed, eliminated, redeployed, or filled as is. An organizational review is also planned for 2016, and I will provide some thoughts on structure, roles, and responsibilities for Council and to your new CAO. My initial observations are that some tweaking may be necessary, but on balance, you generally have the right people in the right place doing the right job. Finally, I wanted to tell you about some other cost-saving measures which are already underway. A number of your senior staff have been trained on what are called lean management principles and processes. In its simplest terms, it's about mapping out a current process, be it the issuance of a building permit, the issuance of a marriage license, the issuance of a property standards issue, mapping that process out, involving the staff who actually deliver that service, and challenge them to find savings both in terms of time and money. This approach will save money and reduce pressure on subsequent budgets, but it must be strengthened and become part of the corporate culture of Aurora. So I believe that these three measures, continuing to look at vacancies as an opportunity to redefine or redeploy resources, secondly, tweaking the structure, and thirdly, implementing a formal and corporate-wide process to continually improve service delivery will, if taken as a package, enable Council to deliver affordable budgets well into the future. And with that, I would ask our Treasurer, Dan Elliott, to provide a more detailed overview of the budget.
Mr. Elliott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get started, I just want to give some credit to where credit is due. I've got a team behind me. I can't do this myself. I've got Jason and his team. Tracy and Karen are in the back. Laura's not with us tonight. They're the ducks that have the feet pedaling real hard behind the scenes. And of course, I can't do it without my department head colleagues. And Pat has been instrumental in helping shape what you see tonight. Tonight, we've got a different budget approach, as the CAO has said. We're trying to take things up to a higher level where the public will find it easier to understand, not so much jargon, and keep things fairly simple. The budget has a number of key deliverables in it, and some of the key messages, and I'll just review these with you, they easily fall out of what I'm going to share with you tonight. Council and staff worked collaboratively to develop that budget direction and the target for 2016. It was a team effort. The budget achieves that direction and reflects a balanced approach, and it applies restraint to reach that target. And we hit the target at 1.8%. The budget maintains and improves service levels wherever possible. The budget builds on Council's track record of being fiscally responsible and its model for managing the repair and replacement of infrastructure and capital funding. And the budget utilizes assessment growth to extend services to our new communities. We have more people, we have more garbage to collect, we have more roads to plow, and so we do use assessment growth to extend our services into those communities. And finally, the budget accommodates pressures that we're facing from the Fire and Emergency Services Group, Central York Fire, and that is being faced both by Newmarket and ourselves, and we have a 5-year strategy to deal with that. So overall, where are we going to go? And let me just review our schedule for you. Tonight, we're looking at this presentation and the overview report that's in your agenda. Following that conversation, we will hear from each department head. There will be a chance for questions after each of them speak. And then following that, we'll have general discussion tonight. Next week, or next time, in 2 weeks' time, we'll have the Public Library Board, the Cultural Center, and the Historical Society come in. We're still working on trying to schedule in the fire chief to come and see you. And then ultimately, we're aiming for a December 8th council budget approval. So what factors affect Aurora's 2016 budget? Well, Aurora is becoming an urban community with rural land. It's now being developed into new housing subdivisions. So that takes additional work. But more importantly, it brings more people to our community. These people need services, and they need infrastructure, and we need to maintain that and service it, plow the roads, pick up their garbage, take their reservations and registrations for programs, answer their calls, and so on. We also face inflation. Inflation is a reality. It affects everybody. It affects us a little bit differently than the homeowner. We don't buy too many bananas, but we buy a lot of asphalt, petrochemicals, and dental plans. We also have this ongoing expansion of the Central York Fire. Central York has a 5-year plan, and we have a 5-year plan to fund it. As the CAO mentioned, the town of Aurora is well advanced in its financial sustainability and financial planning. And it's important to just quickly review for this committee, but also for members of the public watching, the town has a new asset management plan. It's been approved by council, and it becomes a foundational document for repair and replacement of town assets, like our fleet, our roads, and our facilities. That document is on our website, available for public review, as are the other documents that I'm going to speak of. From that tells us really how we plan on managing our assets. One of the systems that we use is an electronic asset management system, and it helps facilitate the planning and tracking for asset maintenance and ultimately replacement. Following from that system then, the managers of our assets prepare a detailed 10-year capital investment plan. In the next 10 years, between new infrastructure and existing infrastructure replacements, we're looking at $187 million to be invested in this town to keep the assets at the service levels that we expect them to be. Good roads, clean facilities, functional facilities, and places that we're proud to visit and to enjoy. In that 10-year capital plan, it earmarks money for reserves for future rehabilitation of those facilities and projects. And we have a plan. We have to stick to that plan. If we stick to the plan, we can achieve that 10-year capital plan and maintain our infrastructure. Many municipalities are seriously grappling with how they're going to be able to do that, and we're on top of it, and we've got a plan. A couple of other things. We have a reserve fund strategy. It's coupled to that 10-year capital plan. All of our reserves are available for the public on our website, details of what they are, where they come from, what they're to be used for, and so that's easy to find. We have an updated development charges bylaw, and this bylaw ensures that growth as it comes and happens, as new structures are put in, that those structures pay the costs of the infrastructure necessary to support them. If it's a new fire hall, the development charges pay for the new fire hall, or an expanded athletic center. These are the things that development charges pay for. One of the new things that we have that is perhaps leading the way is we have a finance advisory committee separate from budget. They provide some budget advice. They provide other interesting discussion and advice. And one of those outcomes is a recent document on the budget principles and budget process that will serve as a reference for future budget processes, and indeed has had a tremendous impact on this budget process. So council and staff worked collaboratively for that direction. And what was that direction? Understanding the pressures facing the corporation, council directed that a 1.8% was an acceptable target for a tax increase, given all of those pressures that we have. What were some of the things that, specifics that we received from council? Maintain existing service levels. I can say that check, we did that. We're maintaining our service levels, and indeed we're extending those services to new communities. We're to reduce the interest from the hydro funds. Check, we did that. $100,000 reduction to the draw, and we're drawing only $200,000 for 2016. We were to reduce the use of supplementary taxes as a way of bolstering our budget. Check, we did that. One of our strategies. And we reduced our reliance by $75,000 down to $500,000. That's on target. We were to continue to fund infrastructure, continue to send funds to our capital reserves. We did that. In fact, we increased our capital contribution by 1% of tax levy. Almost $400,000 additional will go into the tax-funded capital reserves. Council also asked that we put aside about 1.3% of tax levy to help fund those future fire services. This is part of our program, 1.3% of tax levy each year for several years, and we have done that. In fact, last year, the fire budget was slightly above that amount, and we made a small draw from reserves. This year, it's slightly below our new target, and so we'll be making a contribution to the reserves to keep us on track. And that was all part of the strategy. We were to adjust fees and charges at the rate of inflation. pending before council, I believe next week, is a updated fees and charges bylaw that shows indexing of 1.1% everywhere that was possible. Some places it's not possible because of legislation or leases and things, but we did that. And so, Mr. Chair, I believe that it's very clear that we hit the target. 1.8%, we achieved all of the goals that council asked us to do. How can I summarize what the budget includes? Well, how do we spend that money? And this is the net operating budget. This is after each department captures their own sources of revenue. And so this represents the total tax levy, which is nearly $40 million this year. So you can see that infrastructure represents nearly 30% of the tax dollar, almost $12 million of spending. They're the largest group. This is the group that includes all of the roads and linear asset maintenance, facilities and fleet. They also look after the winter control and solid waste management. So that's a very large component of our budget goes there. Next, you can see Central York Fire picks up about 25% of the budget. They don't have a lot of own source revenues, and we share this cost with Newmarket. This is our share, nearly $10 million, 25% of our taxpayers' tax bill. Important to note, and I pulled it out separate this year, is our contributions to infrastructure. It's nearly $4.5 million or $4.6 million will go into reserves from the tax bill, looking after our infrastructure. And as I said, this is where we're ahead of the curve of many municipalities. We're funding our infrastructure. It's still not quite enough, but we're on a plan, and we're sticking to the plan, and if we do that, we'll be fine. Internal support services, this is places like the CAO's office, my office, the legal and the legislative services group, communications and places like that. We take up 11% of the budget. The Aurora Public Library, 9%. Parks and Rec, also net of their program registrations and all of their revenues, 9% of the tax bill goes to them. Building and bylaw services, they have significant fees and revenues. They're at 4% of the tax bill. And planning and development, very important group, but they almost self-fund themselves this year because of their fees and planning applications that are coming in for 2C. And so that is how the tax dollar actually gets distributed internally. However, there's more than just that. There's all the expenses. As I said, the tax budget's nearly $40 million, but the spending budget is nearly $60 million. So where does all that money come from? So it's important to, I just showed you where it goes, but where does it actually come from? So we have our total tax levy funds 67%, 2/3 of our budget, and our expenditures come straight from the tax bill. It's important to note that user fees like Parks and Rec registrations and other user-driven fees comprise 21% of our revenue stream. Grants and federal and provincial funding support, almost 4%. We also do make some draws from reserves. This is not raiding reserves. This is using DC money for DC eligible activities of our staff, such as designing new parks, designing infrastructure works. We draw on that about 3%. Another 3% of our revenue comes from our investment income. Unfortunately, we're able to draw some revenue from fines and penalties, only 2% of our bill. And we also have hydro funds proceeds, another investment income type source, and it's basically zero, but it's $200,000 this year. So that's the distribution of our revenue sources for the total budget of nearly $60 million. As the acting CAO, or the interim CAO mentioned in his opening remarks, this budget represents the lowest tax increase since 2003. You can see back in 2009, pretty close to it. And it's important to know and remember that from 1993 through to 1999, it was 0, 0, 0, all the way across that period of time. And so that made it very difficult. It set us behind the eight ball a bit. And so that's why some of these are fairly high in the past, but we're getting past that bump, and we're now into a stage where while facing some economic uncertainty in the future and in the national and international markets, we can deliver a budget at 1.8%. So what's really driving, what's behind this 1.8%? Let me give you a little visual representation of what this means. We have fire services. They're going to be expanding. They're adding a whole new crew. They're adding additional administration. They're adding additional training resources. And so that represents about 1.3% tax levy increase. That's our funding strategy, 1.3 per year for several years. That's going to be, you'll see that box again next year. We add to that the cost of reducing our hydro reliance. It's almost a half a point by the time we reduce the hydro interest and a couple of other things there. The SUP reduction represents close to a half a point. Then comes our increase in our cash to capital. That cash to capital is, again, used for infrastructure, goes to reserves from the tax bill, and then it's used to rehabilitate our infrastructure when it needs to be done. So that cash to capital adds to the pressure. We're going to be seeing that box for a number of years. And then everything else in the budget, net of all of the additional revenues and other operational changes that we have, our budget's increased by 2.4%. A little more than inflation, but that represents a growing community. And then offsetting all of this, you say, how do we get to 1.8? We have 3.4% new revenue coming from the new residents in town. This is not a tax increase, this is, call it a tax expansion, because there's more people paying the same amount of tax as prior year. And so we have more tax in the base budget, 3.4%, and that is how we get to the 1.8 mathematically. So hopefully that is very easy for the members of the public to understand and what's driving it. That all other changes, we're going to be hearing from each department head briefly on their achievements in the past year and their goals for the next year. There will be an opportunity to ask questions about their budget changes in there. But as the members of the public who are watching, it's important to remember that there's only, your tax bill consists of 3 taxes, and this council in this room only control one piece. And that's about 36% of your bill goes to the town of Aurora. The other 43% goes to York Region, and another 21% goes to your education portions. The council of the town of Aurora does not control the education rate or the York Region rate. So that's how the bill is, and our 1.8% only applies to that 36% of your tax bill. So what does this mean to the taxpayer? A 1.8% increase to the tax levy translates to an additional $31 on a home assessed at $500,000, or about $6.20 for each $100,000 of assessment if your assessment value is different than $500. And hopefully that makes the math easy for you to figure out what will happen to your tax bill with this budget. We believe that this budget, again, hits the targets that council set for us, all of the goals and objectives we hit, and we look forward to participating with you in our budget discussions. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I have a little friend with me to help. And following this, we'll begin hearing from our department heads. We're going to start with the largest department. Does anybody remember who it was? Infrastructure and Environmental Services. And so we'll start with Ilmar after our comments and questions on this presentation. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elliott. First of all, may I have a motion to receive the 2 delegations, please? Councillors Tom and Kim. Questions for either Mr. Moyle or Mr. Elliott? I've got Councillor Peary, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going back to page... The breakdown by percentages, where was that one again?
That one? The net operating budget, Councillor?
Page 5. Well, both net operating and gross revenue. Have there been any studies done that dictate where we should be or where best practices are to Mr. Moyle's, knowledge, and how are we looking?
Do you mean percentage relative, per department relative to our total budget?
Exactly.
Okay, Mr. Moyle.
I think a couple of observations. I think given the range of services that the town of Aurora must deliver, that's set out in the Municipal Act and in the Region of York Act. So it's not uncommon to see the largest percentage of the budget going to things like infrastructure and environmental services. The percentage to fire service, in my view, and fire and emergency services is perhaps slightly higher than I've seen in other communities. What is quite striking to me is the Parks and Recreation and Culture budget and the reliance of the non-tax supported funds to pay for that service. It's a service which is used by many people in the community, but I did see a report, a BMA report, which had the percentage of money from users who utilize the service as opposed to coming from taxes. And I think Aurora scores very, very high in that regard. And again, that's a very good practice because those individuals who are using the service are paying for the service. So if you're not using it, you're not paying for it. So the percentage of the budget, the net budget going from taxes through Parks and Recreation is small, but that's a good thing because you're getting a funding source from the users. The internal support services, essentially that's the cost of administration for running this place. The average is somewhere between roughly 15%, so it's slightly lower than other communities that I've worked in the past. The big thing, again, is the brown area, the contributions to infrastructure, $4.5, almost $4.6 million of your budget you're salting away every year to repair and replace things. You would be shocked at the number of municipalities where that number is zero, or they're relying on federal gas tax money or infrastructure programming or whatever. So the fact that you're contributing this much money as a percentage of your budget is unusual, and unusual in a good way, because you are recognizing the fact the growth will eventually stop and you have to repair and replace the infrastructure that you have. So the fact it's in the base of your budget is a very good thing, and frankly I think many municipalities would be envious to see a pie chart like this.
Councilor.
From a sustainability standpoint, this is something that's very sustainable.
Yes, absolutely. So one question that came up, and we had many debates at the senior management table about the budget and the budget forecast in the future, together with members, or discussions with members of council. Essentially, this budget can be accomplished because over the next probably 5 or so years, you will have the benefit of assessment growth to help buffet some of the increases of the budget. But what happens when that ends? Well, the good news is, in many respects, is that there is an end to it, because that means the town of Aurora will have built out. So all the infrastructure that you need to provide services to your community are now in place. You don't need another fire station. You won't need another recreation complex. You won't need a new road program. You'll be into repair and replacement of your existing infrastructure. So that means any new assessment growth you get is almost gravy, because those individuals who will be coming to the community, perhaps through intensification, will be utilizing infrastructure which has already been bought and paid for. So communities, there are a number of communities across the country and the province who are achieving build-out. Those that have the foresight to recognize that there will be a change in the kind of development activity and have contributed reserves to infrastructure are in good shape. Those communities that don't, aren't. And they often are the victims of restructuring or amalgamations, or the city of York has to get, I'm not picking on them, but the former city of York had to become part of the city of Toronto because it was finished growing. It had infrastructure which was in great difficulty. The cost for running the former city of York had to be subsidized by North York and other parts of it. So those are not very good ends to a municipal organization. But again, I think the fact that you are contributing money and have a history of contributing money, and not only contributing but increasing that contribution, puts you in very good stead when the traditional greenfield development stops.
Councillor?
So just a couple points more. What really stands out to me, if we go to the 6th page of our booklet, the visual explanation of the 1.8 increase, the second and third items on those lists are, in my view, things we don't have to be doing. We could be looking at a 0.3% increase, but I think as a whole and historically, we've looked at investing in Aurora as something that's important, something we have to do. So the fact that 1.5% is really dedicated to us trying to better our financial situation, I think is something we can all be proud of, and it's something that we've been doing for a while now. So those are my thoughts, my comments. Mr. Moyle, if you wanted to stick around for a few more years, we'd be happy to have you. But thanks to everybody on bringing this forward. Greatly appreciated.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Don. And also just to echo that, I think all the staff have done a fantastic job in bringing this back in terms of a collaborative process, and certainly that's much appreciated. Through you to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, on I guess it's page 7, the slide that shows the 3 components of our property bill. We've already indicated that the town is advocating for a 1.8% increase. The school, I guess, we'll assume is going to be 0 eventually. And so with the region, what's going to be the combined tax rate if the region approves their prospective budget?
Mr. Elliott, please.
On a combined basis, if school is 0, in the region, I believe it's 2.85. The combined basis is 1.88. I know for certain it's 188. The exact number of the York regions eludes me at the moment, but we did use the value from their forecast that was recently approved during the summer.
Great. And so if I go to the next slide, which talks about the impact to the homeowner, whether it's 1.8 or that 1.88%, those numbers will be relatively similar. Is that correct? Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From Mr. Elliott's presentation on page 3 and from what Mr. Moyle said, updated development charges bylaw to ensure growth pays for itself. That would mean that growth pays 100% for itself.
Mr. Moyle?
If I could, this has been a bone of contention, I think, with municipalities for quite some time. In the current Development Charge Act, there are certain mandatory discounts that are provided. So as an example, in some services, you do the background study on the growth-related projects and the growth-related costs. You're only entitled to collect from new development 90% of certain services. The good news is the province is considering changes to the Development Charge Act. The bill, I think, is going through the House now, and there have been many requests through AMO and other municipalities to cover 100% of the cost. There are certain services that we don't provide here in Aurora, but are provided by the region, like transit, which are really disadvantaged because the development charge development charge legislation is based on the last 10 years of service. So if we didn't have a bus service, you can't really count that. So that's a challenge. What Aurora has done, though, and a number of municipalities have sought essentially voluntary contributions from developers to help offset at least a portion of that. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe the town charges approximately $3,000 per unit as a voluntary contribution to make up at least part of that shortfall, which is in the provincial development charge legislation. So again, surprisingly, some growth municipalities don't even ask or don't try to get voluntary agreements in place, but Aurora, Milton, Oakville, and a few others in the York region have. There's no legislative authority to do it, but it's something which is negotiated for a community benefit. So that's a long-winded way of saying that Aurora uses the law which I guess you have to, there's our solicitor sitting there, it complies with the law to extract or take as much as legally possible from the development charge regime, plus these voluntary contributions.
Councillor?
So are you saying that the voluntary contributions, and I'm thinking that's only happened with the 2C area? Right. Those voluntary contributions make up for the 10%, bringing it up to 100%?
Mr. Moyle?
To be honest, I don't know how that number was arrived at. I don't really know. I don't know.
I guess my point is, are we completely sure that the development charges are going to ensure that growth pays for itself? Because that is what this statement is.
Well, that's really a provincial policy statement.
No, I'm not disputing the policy. I'm just saying, can we say that growth pays for itself when we get 90% from DCs?
Yeah. Mr. Moore?
The short answer is no. It doesn't completely pay for 100% of the costs. The legislation is the legislation. The act is subject of a review by the province as we speak, and there's been a considerable amount of pressure brought to bear by municipalities to ensure that 100% of the cost is. The 10% reductions, the theory behind this is that you use a development charge pot of money to build a new arterial road. And the argument that the development community makes is that new arterial road is not just used by the residents of that subdivision, it's used by other residents in the community. That's the argument that they make. And as a consequence, the government had tried to codify that by saying, all right, 90%, well, depending on the service, each service is a little bit different, is the responsibility of future residents, and the existing residents pay a relatively small portion, but it's still a portion. Again, Aurora, Oakville, I could think of a handful of communities have said, as part of the negotiation of a secondary plan to the development community, interesting, here's a development charge amount, and it's a negotiation. And we want additional funds over and above what's in the Development Charges Act. It's clear it's a voluntary contribution. There's no statutory authority to do this, but it's done as a condition, basically, of approval. And my understanding, again, is Aurora collects roughly $3,000 per unit, and many municipalities don't.
Councillor?
I'll try this one more time. We're saying in our material that's been presented and to the public that development charges ensure that growth pays for itself, and my point is, it doesn't. That's all I have to say.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to commend Mr. Elliott and all the staff for preparing this. I think the top line number looks great, and you look at the inputs and outputs, it looks very clean. While Councillor Gartner just asked her question about DCs, just to maybe help other people, I'm not sure if this is where Councillor Gartner was going, but for the sake of the public who's going to ask the obvious question, and I think most of those around the table have a clear idea what it is, but just for public consumption, Mr. Elliott, if you could respond to this question. People will say that the 1.8% was arrived at because of the revenues from the DCs. Can you kind of elaborate, just for public consumption, just in a simplified way, that it wasn't, if you could just speak to the DCs and the DC revenues and how, is it kind of, quote, a one-off big-time help to get that impressive number of 1.8% as opposed to something else.
Mr. Elliott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the development charges is a capital infrastructure fee levied upon new development as it builds in the community. And it helps to fund the capital infrastructure of the facilities and roads and other infrastructure, municipally owned infrastructure that we need in this community, such as a new fire hall or a new community center. If you're adding 20,000 people, you're going to need a new pool. And so the DCs help pay for that infrastructure. Al would like me to say that again, but I won't. So the DCs help build the structure of our community, the backbone, the infrastructure behind our community that the residents come to rely upon as they move in. Taxes from those new residents pay to operate and clear and maintain and service those new assets, as well as everyone else's taxes serve and do everything else that the municipality does, pick up their garbage, clear the snow, and run the community centers.
Councillor
So-
Kim, I'm sorry, Mr. I was just going to suggest to Councillor Kim that perhaps he's referring more to the growth number as opposed to the DC number.
That's where I was going. And so when we look at that last slide where I was trying to give you the visual explanation, it's this very last box. Our fire services are increasing. We're doing some financial things, as Councillor Puri mentioned. All of the other changes that are in our budget include expanding our services to those new communities. So the cost of the additional 3,000 homes of garbage that we have to pick up is in that 2.4 box. But those residents will also be getting a tax bill this year. And so that's 3.4% offsetting everything else. And so are we living off of that? No. We're using that to extend our services into those communities, but also using it to do everything else, to accommodate inflation, to help us with our financial strategies, and fund our fire services.
Councillor Kim?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Elliott. I just wanted to make sure that the public was aware in terms of that number. Lastly, prior to the run-up of the budget process, you had mentioned that we are kind of living on borrowed time in terms of the one-third component of our tax revenues. It goes to the school taxes, and that's been at 0% increase. And we'd like to use that benefit of that portion not going up to put into more infrastructure, as our CAO and Mayor Daw mentioned. Is that the increase of 1 point so percent that you had mentioned in the past? Is that the cash to capital portion of 3 to 2.5? Is that the kind of trying to make up and play catch up and to set aside infrastructure money for rainy day? Is that the portion?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a 1% of taxes levied increase to our contribution to reserves. So we're adding $382,500 to the cash to capital contribution from the tax levy. And that is, in part, here it is on the third box from the left, the cash to capital, 1% of tax levy is causing a tax pressure. If we didn't increase the contribution, it wouldn't be a tax pressure. It would be the same as last year. So that's a 1% of levy pressure. And so that is helping us stay on top of our infrastructure, and this is what many municipalities are doing. The region of York is in a phase-in program trying to climb that number to 2% per year. They're somewhere in between 1 and 2 now. And so they recognize that their infrastructure, they're a little further behind than we are. We can stay at 1%. They need to get to 2.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. I totally agree with the contribution of that amount, and I just want to connect the dots in terms of what we were talking about a few months ago and this portion here. So thank you very much.
Any other comments? Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just have a few comments. I think staff did a great job. I mean, we set a target. They met the target. The service levels are maintained or better. We've held the line on new hires. We've instituted a vacancy control program. look for efficiencies. And I think it puts us in a great position today and for the future. And I like to commend staff on working to come back to and present council with a number that council asked for, and they've done it. So far, great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Marcus. Any other speakers? Councilor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 3, through Mr. Mayor, the top slide, what we have achieved in financial planning, and you have new. New is the asset management plan. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I thought that asset management plan was the software we had purchased 3 years ago.
Mr. Elliott.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to shoot back through the slides here. Don't want to give anybody a seizure here. Slide before here. There's a couple of things here. The asset management plan is a thick document that we presented to capital budget a month or so ago. It's the document that tells us and tells the public how we manage the assets, what condition they're in an overall state, how we assess them. For example, in pavement, we use a pavement index. For vehicles, we have a checklist of several variables that we evaluate. It talks about how we manage our assets. The asset management system, the second bullet on this slide, is the actual software that we use. Every asset that infrastructure and environmental services have is cataloged in that system with dates, values, repair and maintenance schedules, planned investments, and detailed condition indexes and things. And so that's the system that is actively used by the asset managers to track their assets. And with the number of assets that we have, it's important that we have a digital system to do that and help keep track of things. We don't lose anything. Then coming out of that is the 10-year capital plan, and that's detailed out for council when we plan on making significant capital investments in our assets, what they are, and in what year over the next 10 years.
Councilor?
Okay, so I think I understand what you're saying is the system that we employed and purchased, that software plan. One of the byproducts was to get this asset management plan in place, which also ties in to the 10-year capital R&R replacement plan. So we have a working system that can work and effectively bring things to on a day-to-day basis, and then you can evaluate that into how the plan comes forward, and then you're able to present at a budget how this all ties in, and you'll make your adjustments, but at least you're working with something to steer by and navigate. That new kind of caught me up, but now I understand the difference. Well, I mean, I'm just like everyone else. I had said all last term, this is the sort of budget we needed. And I'm pleased to say that with Mr. Moyle, it suddenly has come, and I guess it's a combination of what we were trying to do and then effectively doing it this year. So it's great, and I think getting the language clear for our residents is going to create an open and transparent sort of way of looking at our budget so that it's understandable. It's still complex. I did want to go to the question that Councillor Kim was bringing forward on the education, the 3 parts to our tax bill. And through you, Mr. Mayor, the education portion has been 0 increase. And this is a way to make our overall, or it has effectively made the overall increases not as high. So my understanding is it's the province is keeping the municipal tax, and this is how they're contributing to that. Once, I don't know how long they can go on at 0%, but well, I have some ideas how they can do it, but I sense that when that day will soon be different when they start asking for more money for their education, and so that'll be another pressure.
Mr. Moore?
I can try to answer that because I'm old. I was around, in fact, was seconded to the province to work on the Who Does What project many years ago in the late 90s. which ultimately saw the uploading of some of the costs to the region or to the province and downloading of an awful lot to municipalities. The theory behind having the province really now has two sources of revenue for education. They have a plug number, which is the number that they derive from and ask municipalities to collect on their behalf, which is frozen. It's been frozen for a decade or so. It's but the cost of education obviously doesn't get smaller or stay the same, it gets larger. So that's coming from income taxes. So that's part of the challenge the province has at funding education, because it's competing with healthcare and infrastructure and other things. But they made a conscious decision to cap at least at that time, to cap the contributions from property taxes and have the majority of the funding come from income taxes. They may decide, given their financial condition at some point, as you suggest, maybe we should revisit that. But I can assure you there will be an awful lot of conversations that take place among municipalities in the province if they decide to do that, because many municipalities have a financial plan funded on that original deal, which was a freezing of that increase or deal with the funding of their responsibilities through the funding sources that they have, which are income tax. And of course, we don't have that at the municipal level.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Moyle. That sort of makes sense. So they'll just use that 21% as a base, and of course they always have debt to make their obligations.
And deficit budgets.
In deficit budgets, exactly, which we're not allowed to do. I just think we need to work on that message a little bit more, where that money that we're collecting on that tax bill, where that sort of goes. So just a comment, maybe it goes to the Finance Committee, but or maybe it addresses Councillor Humphreys. But there's a couple of key things that we struggle to understand even at this table. One is DC's, and I think the other is our portion, or the blended portion. And those are the sort of things where, in addition to everything else, I think we could collectively get something that is understandable. Quite a challenge, because there's so many ways to interpret it. My only other comment, and maybe you'll see it somewhere down the road, but is public art, which we have none, and it's never budgeted. It was the first year that I attended, the region recommended that each municipality put 2%. We earmarked, as I believe, 1% that first year, but I think it's more of an economic and development, or a way to drive to make our place look attractive for tourism and for economic development, and that's probably another conversation of the day. And it's just a little minor amount, but I think that's part of a strategy going forward.
I think perhaps, Councillor, when Mr. Ramuno brings forward his report, that might be a good question for him.
Thank you.
Councillor Gartner, second time.
Thank you. And I was remiss in not thanking staff at the table and behind me, and for the tremendous amount of work. I don't think any of us on this side, at least I can't imagine how much work goes into that. And I think this year, with the leadership and expertise of Mr. Moyle, done a fabulous job.
Any other speakers? Just to the delegations. Well, we're coming back to the actual presentations from department heads. Mr. Moyle? Absolutely.
Just a quick follow-up. You mentioned that you're an old man, but you're a very attractive old man.
I don't know if I can rule that out of order or not. I've got a big problem with that one. Council, all in favor of receipt, please. Contrary? That's carried. Thank you, Mr. Elliott, your staff, and certainly all the department heads for the amount of work that you've done on this so far. We will now move, who's up first? Mr. Simonovskis, the man with the big budget.
Mr. Mayor, just procedurally.
Just a second, Mr. Simonovskis, please. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, when Council approved the agenda, it did specifically say that it was going to consider item 1, which is before you, first, and the rationale for that is simple. We'll merely want to put, and I would suggest actually on the first, second, and third clause on the floor, so that it's there But these would continue throughout the subsequent meetings of the Budget Committee as we would recess so that they, at the end of this meeting, and they would continue. It's just so that it's there procedurally, but I would suggest that we only put clauses 1, 3, and 4 on the floor, because the second one would be redundant. 1, 3, and 4. 1, 3, and 4, yes.
So Councillor Thompson, you're moving that. Councillor Maraca seconding it. Any comments or questions? So we'll just move it at this point. We're not going to carry it.
Yeah, and we'll just...
Okay? We're just moving it at this point. Mr. Simonauskas? Sorry, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. So being the first budget presentation tonight, I'm going to go through a format which is very consistent for the rest of the departments. First, I'll speak to the department functions. As you're aware, we do have a fairly large portfolio, very much involved in the community and the health of the community. Our engineering capital projects department deals with infrastructure, renewal and replacement plans, design, construction, tendering, and implementation. Facilities and fleet services are done through a different manager, and that area involves the operation, maintenance of our facilities, as well as the ongoing maintenance of our fleet, fuel supply, and overall health of those very public assets from the facility perspective. The road network operations is another area where we're dealing with both road surface and underground assets, primarily with the water and wastewater infrastructure and stormwater infrastructure, as well as curbs and sidewalks and streetlights, which are town-owned assets. And our solid waste and recycling program, which is a combined program being responsible for the collection and delivery of that waste to the municipal or to the regional transfer station, where the region then carries on with the processing of that material. The water and wastewater budget is also an area that we'll be discussing at a future meeting, as we just recently received the forecast approved rates from the region, and we'll be combining those into our calculations to bring that budget forward in the near future. Departmental achievements for 2015. We've had a few achievements this year, and I'm proud to say that we were able to deliver on a number of priorities for both council and our department. One that I'm very happy to say is actually going to be starting next Monday is the conversion of our streetlights to LED with a count of 4,500 streetlights. That program has had a number of years of study and investigation and is moving forward. Completion of the Aurora Family Leisure Complex renovations, which were completed earlier this year, and staff have been working closely with council members and some of the users in that community to try and iron out some opportunities for improvement and move that building forward. Another area which actually was an initiative a number of years back, but we've had one of our successes this year, which is the application of our Safe Routes to School policy. The town of Aurora was the first municipality in York Region to actually adopt this policy, which is a policy to implement a combined plan, including the school board, the region, as well as town staff, to create safe routes through better traffic management and control of traffic around school areas. So the application at Regency Acres was one of our first schools, and it was very successfully undertaken, and all the participants were very happy with the outcome of that. We also, this year, had a very successful implementation of our backyard composting pilot. There was an open house for the participants last Tuesday, and we had a number of residents, 11 in fact, who participated actively, resulting in some very substantial information that the region will be using as a baseline for the other municipalities. And the essence of that program was to encourage backyard composting as an alternative to using the green bins, resulting in cost savings both for the municipality as well as engagement from the community with regards to the value of that program. We also completed, as we do every year, a number of capital projects with regards to road improvements, and the list of roads that we've renovated this year are listed here, as well as the sidewalk gap program, which is something we started about 6 years ago, identifying a multi-year plan to basically create sidewalk links where gaps had been left in the community for various reasons, whether they're incomplete developments or integration of various development phases. And that program is moving along as well. We also did a relatively major repair on Yonge Street, which was south of Wellington. It was a culvert that was deteriorating and had to be replaced. Somewhat of an intrusive project for the local residents, but well worth the investment. We also initiated a speed cushion pilot program under the guidance of council, and that is a program that is proceeding with more information coming to council for 2016. Another area that I'm very proud of is the application or the elimination of sand application on the roads, which was something that we've been investigating for some time, and through council's guidance with regards to program opportunities, we identified this as something that was very beneficial and are looking forward to our first season without having to use sand on the roads. We also have found some improvements through a utility locates process. It's a process that we share with an organization outside of the town called One Call, which is a sort of a unified utility locates service, and we're able to create some efficiencies in use of our technology to improve that process. There was also a very successful program with regards to the asset management system, our WAMS system, or the Maximo program that we have, where we deployed tablets or field data computers for our staff, both in the Parks and Roads Department. This was a project that was approved this year and was successfully deployed in the last 6 weeks, and staff are starting to use that technology now in the field, which is helping their efficiency. And I think the one that actually is showing most promise for the future was our foray into using lean principles in process review. This is a program that we investigated late last year and early in 2015, and identified a number of processes within our Infrastructure and Environmental Services Department, and we're able to identify a number of opportunities both for cost savings, efficiency, and really focusing on the end user as a client and focusing on those services in the most efficient way. So that was a very successful pilot that we did over the summer, and I'm looking forward to future projects in that area, as the CAO mentioned. Just a couple more. Our Joint Operations Center, which is still scheduled for completion in early 2016, will be our first LEED certified building for the town. Advance awareness of the priority for the 404 overpass at St. John's Side Road, both a priority for council and staff from the perspective of a planning tool to manage our traffic volumes and traffic congestion. And it's something that I think the entire organization is actively pursuing from a perspective of budgeting and finding a date to get that overpass built. And a successful promotion of a food waste reduction campaign with York Region, which is really focusing back to the solid waste question of if we can generate less waste, it'll actually result in benefits both from the environmental and economic perspectives of that program. Going forward for 2016, we, as I mentioned, lean practices is something we want to continue for 2016, and that's going to be a very active part of our program going forward. Also looking at integrating various corporate project management practices to create a consolidated delivery model. And this goes back to taking the best practices that we have in the various departments and bringing forward a simplified version of a project management model that we can all apply consistently. As well as implementing a garbage bag limits and bag tag program for better alignment with the N6. And this is something that will be coming forward to this council in 2016 as a result of our retendering for the waste contract. The goal here with the N6 partners is to create better alignment with service levels so that the contractor has a clearer mandate across boundaries to minimize friction across boundaries with regards to delivery, service, and expectations. So that's something that may take some time to implement, but we are looking to address those opportunities and bring forward some options to council. And lastly, for 2016 is the issuance of a tender for the renewal of the N6 waste contract, which is expiring in the fall of 2017, with the intent of having a contract in place 12 months in advance of that expiry to allow the new contractor time to purchase their equipment and prepare for the handover. And Mr. Mayor, that's the end of my presentation. If you'd like, I can sit for some questions.
You can. Thank you, Mr. Simonauskas. May I have a motion to receive Mr. Simonauskas' presentation? Councillor Todd, Councillor Puri. Questions for Mr. Simonauskas, please. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Simonovskis. Under the 2015 achievements, successfully applied lean principles on several service areas. Could you be more specific on that? What service areas in specific?
Sorry. There we go. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we identified a number of areas. The snow review program was one of the areas where we looked at how we deliver the snow services, the snow management services. That was one area. Another area that we investigated was how we deliver our maintenance of our pumping stations. And this is one that we're still investigating. There are opportunities for savings with regards to how we deliver those services. Right now it's a combined contract and in-house operation. We're looking at changing that mix, and that was based on how those performances or how those services are being delivered and how they perform. And another area was a simple area with regards to how we do our water testing and sampling program. So they're not exciting areas, but some of them are very time consuming, and if we can find a way to reduce staff commitment in those areas, we can generate some savings. So I'd like to say overall, we've identified about $750,000 in savings over the next 3 years, if we're able to implement all the identified opportunities. So it's really a process of bringing those areas to council that need to be endorsed by council and then moving those changes forward.
Councillor?
Thank you, and there certainly has been some excitement about snow around this table, and hopefully we'll never have any about water testing. I somehow am out of the loop on the food waste reduction program. So when was that? When did that information go out?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. So the food waste reduction program is actually being led by the region, and what it is, it's an advertising campaign. And if you hadn't noticed, there's a number of ads throughout the media channels that we have in town, as well as across the region. And the focus, what the region identified through their master plan, their waste master plan, that a big component of waste or recyclable waste is actually food waste. And so their focus was to try and increase awareness around how much we bring home, how much grocery we buy, how much we eat, and how much we actually consume versus how much we put in the green bin. So that was their drive, and we were really a partner with them in that conduit of communication. So the initiative was driven by and paid for by the region, and we were really just facilitating the communication channels.
Thank you, Mr. Simonovskis, and not only in the green bin, but also in the garbage, unfortunately.
I've got Councillor Tom, Councillor Marakis, Councillor Thompson, and we can include information from the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Simonovskis. My question is on page 2 in the middle slide. It's the same slide as the food waste reduction campaign. Just wanted to ask for the public's edification. It mentions the Joint Operations Center being the first planned LEED certified building. I wonder if you could explain what that is.
Mr. Simonovskis?
Yes, certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. This is it's a nationally accepted program in energy management and conservation. So essentially what it is creating a building that operates as efficiently as possible based on technology available. And it's based on a very robust system where a third-party reviewer has to come in and audit the program, both from a design and construction perspective, as well as an operating period. And they look at things like energy efficient features of the building, how the building is situated, whether there's recyclable materials being used in the building, how the building was constructed, what happened with waste materials from the site. So it's a number of environmental aspects, and it provides a robust certification that fits with buildings throughout North America. So essentially, if you're a LEED building and you're certified to a certain level, then there's some sense of consistency across the country on what that means.
Councillor?
Thank you. And when we finally move over to the Joint Operations Center, what kind of savings operationally is that going to provide the town once we move all of our operations to that building, if any?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. The move from the old Operations Center to the new Operations Center is actually going to cost us more because of the larger facility. So, but the savings are in the cost per square foot. I believe when we were doing the initial analysis, it's about half the cost per square foot to operate, but it's a much larger site. So there are some additional costs to run the facility, but it is an efficient facility.
Councillor Maracus, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Simonauskas. Mr. Simonauskas, on the first page, third slide, it mentions completed road projects, and I'm just wondering, I'm curious, a few of them, are they actually completed, or are they just after the first phase, and there will be a second phase as far as the top asphalt going in next season?
Yes, certainly through Mr. Mayor. So these are the projects that we started in 2015, and there is a second. So every road has a 3-year, every road project has a 3-year life. The first year is design, second year is tendering construction, and the third year is top course asphalt. So you're correct. So we actually have projects that were completed this year that were started in 2014, but you are correct. These are sort of the new ones for 2015.
Thank you. And then through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonauskas, in tab 6, page 4, under other costs, I see the waste management, we have it as a favorable, close to 6%. And I'm just wondering, is that due to the fact that we're going to be signing a new contract and we're anticipating that we will be favorable?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor, solid waste is an interesting area, and it's not related to the new contract. It's what it's actually related to is a change in composition of materials. Our contract, the N6 contract, is based on a cost pickup per ton, whereas other contracts are done based on a cost per stop. So it doesn't matter what you pick up, it's going to cost you the same every time you stop the vehicle in front of a building. What's happening in the industry, and you probably see it within your own composition of blue box material, there's a lot less glass and metals in blue bin material, and a lot more plastics and a lot less papers. So it's what we're calling the light weighting of waste. And because we're on a per ton basis, we're seeing the light weighting of costs. So our costs have actually not gone up as quickly as we were anticipating based on both growth and cost of inflation. Even though the contract has conditions for addressing both of those cost pressures, the net effect is that the costs are not increasing as drastically as we would have anticipated because of the shift in composition.
Thank you. So I guess it just seems, I guess we have, with the more growth that we have coming in, we're actually going to be paying less money for the waste, which is, I mean, I guess that's a good thing. So,
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Mr. Simonauskas, in your presentation, you made references to expanding the lean practices program. And so if we could just talk about the key performance measures that's in our budget notes, page 6-3. I'll give you a sec to grab it. In those KPIs, you identify the target for 2016 for road operations, waste collection, and facilities operations. Can I assume that the decrease is a result of your initiatives through lean practices? Those are the goals?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. What we're really focusing on is trying to factor out as much waste as we possibly can, and the hope is that it results in actual savings.
So outside of the lean practices review, is there another way that you'd help to determine those targets? Because, I mean, they vary from each individual one, but roughly they're all about a 1% decrease in cost per household.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, is the question, are there other factors that I've used to... Through you, Mr. Mayor, the services themselves, there are cost pressures related with each of the services. So whether it's inflation related to the cost of materials or our cost of labors, which we all have to deal with within the organization. From our department's perspective, what I am trying to look at is how can we do it better, faster, smarter, cheaper. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to save money across the board. The intent is that if we can reduce costs in one area, but then reallocate those resources to another area that needs some bolstering, there's a shift. So I'm looking for a general decrease in costs on a per household basis, but I'm also looking at a balance of services. So if we save money, as an example, in the snow program, we've identified an opportunity of $130,000 in savings. My commitment to materialize that $130,000 isn't so much that it's going to be a reduction in the budget, but it may be a reallocation of, say, savings in staff time to invest that time in some other area that we could then do a better job of or create another opportunity. So it's a redeployment that's not going to result in huge savings at the end of the day.
If I may, I appreciate that. I guess what I was trying to ask, and I probably didn't ask it properly, was, how are the targets determined?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the targets are basically determined on historic trends. So I'm looking at historic trends, looking at the cost pressures year over year based on what's happened in the last 6 or 7 years, and then seeing what's coming up for 2016.
Appreciate that. And can you comment whether or not we achieved our targets for 2015? Because it says results, but it's not clear to me whether or not those were favorable results or unfavorable results versus the 2015 target, unless I pull out my notes from last year. Do you know off the top of your head?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, these KPIs are a little different than last year's KPIs. We had made an adjustment to the program. In the past, if you recall, I actually had a graphic which was a little different representation. So the 2015 numbers aren't actually comparable to anything last year. I think from my perspective, what I'm trying to be consistent with is that I'm trying to have a decreasing trend. So as long as we're moving in the right direction, I feel we're actually making progress. It's still incremental, but it's in the right direction. So again, because of a change from 2014 to 15, I don't know if that's comparable directly with what we were doing last year.
But during next budget cycle, it would be the same process. We'll at least be able then to determine whether or not we achieve those targets.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a continuation on that line of thought. Normally, when you have key performance measures, there is a benchmark or a comparable, and I know you responded to Councillor Thompson's inquiry by stating that you're looking at more of the trends versus a benchmark. Do we have any idea? I don't necessarily believe that we follow the guidelines of what the majority of municipalities are doing, because I believe in continuous improvement, so it doesn't really matter what other people are doing. But just for comparable, do you have a comparable as to per household what others, whether exceeding those benchmarks or not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, one of our internal objectives is to be one of the most cost-effective municipalities in the province, and this is something that I think Council would be very much in support of. The key metric that we have to do that measurement is the MPMP metrics, which is done by the province, and all municipalities are required to submit that information to the province based on standard forms, which finance, I'm sure Dan can provide a whole day's lecture on how that's done. The challenge with that program and what we're finding with looking at the information is that there's some flexibility in how the data can be reported. So we are making that a priority for our department to understand those metrics. We're not the lowest, but what we're now doing is going back, and this is part of the work that was done a couple of years ago with the consultant we had in from a service level review perspective. We're going back to those municipalities that seem to be very efficient to understand what they're doing that may be different than us. I can tell you from my experience working across York Region as well as in Ontario, we do a very good job of what we do. There aren't silver bullets out there. So for me, it's more of an exercise of how are they reporting their information so we can start reporting our information consistently. And if there are practices that do result in efficiencies, how can we apply them in our organization? But I would rather look at the perspective of what we do here is that we do try to be as efficient as we can, and we actually share our best practices with the other municipalities as we develop things as well. So it's a two-way street. It's really a two-way street.
So essentially, you're saying that because the inputs are different from region or municipality to municipality, it's hard to really compare. And
it's hard to compare, but what we try to do is look behind the numbers and actually have the conversations around what's actually happening to generate those numbers, so we understand where that's coming from and benefit from those knowledge transfers, rather than just looking at a metric and saying, we're more efficient than that municipality. Well, that may not be the case.
Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think one of the key indicators or performances of our municipality is customer service. And I've worked in customer service a great deal of my life, and it is an acquired skill, and it takes a knowledge of what it is you're doing and how to best do it, and then responding and being aware of where you can improve, and listening is very important. So all these indications, especially your department, Mr. Simonauskas, require that, and I think all our departments do, but especially yours because it's very visual. It's very quick when you hear about snow removal and garbage waste, and this council table knows that we are always in tune when that's not happening. And then at the same time, our parks and rec facilities are providing great service. Front of the line, people dealing with our residents is so key, and satisfaction is one of the great KPIs. I'm very appreciative to see that we are developing that approach, and it looks like we're definitely adding that to the whole picture. So those are my comments on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Simonauskas? All in favor? Contrary? That's carried. Thank you. Mr. Downey.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, members of the public. It's my pleasure to present our budget accomplishments and our forecast for 2016. Following the same format as Ilmer did previously, there's the clicker. Our departmental functions are broken down into 5 separate areas: administration, parks and open space and trails, recreation, business support, and cultural services, the new service we acquired last year. 2015, each year we have a number of accomplishments, and these are unique to 2015, but we have many successes throughout the year, particularly with our special events and the many parks and trails that we provide to the public. But some of the elements that are unique to 2015 we're continuing with our emerald ash borer treatment and looking for new and better ways of dealing with this devastating tree disease. We opened the Aurora Museum. Finally, after a long period of time, the Aurora Museum opened in 2015. We updated and reviewed the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We're well on the way with that master plan. We're moving forward with a public meeting this month, and our hope is to get an approved document early in 2016. We also are developing our first sports plan in Aurora. This being the year of sport, these 2 documents certainly play a vital role in ensuring that sports and anything related to those are front and center when discussing with the public or moving the Parks and Recreation Department forward. Commencement of our culture pricing plan. Culture pricing plan? No. Pardon? Precinct. I thought that was corrected, but clearly not. The cultural precinct plan. The cultural precinct was something new. We're certainly working actively in moving that forward. And once again, we hope to present something to council early in 2016. That's a very exciting project, and we had an extremely good turnout in our walkabout a couple of weekends ago. Commencement of a repurposing of our 5 town facilities. Another consultant report we're working on right now. In fact, we have meetings set up, and once again, doing our very best to make sure that the master plan, the cultural precinct plan, and the repurposing of those 5 facilities come before council in a very narrow window so that you can compare one plan's recommendations with another. This year, we also received the Pan Am Torch, a very exciting event. It was fairly rainy near the end, but it was great to see the torch come through town. We also looked at acquiring a portion of Hallmark. As you know, Hallmark was sold a couple of years ago. We purchased the green space around Hallmark. There's also purchase of the Mavernack green space. We introduced a number of new programs for youth at the Aurora Family Leisure Complex with the opening of that facility early in 2015, and the completion and presentation of a 3-year plan for the Aurora collection was presented to council. We have sponsorship naming for 3 rinks, and I hope to be able to say 4 rinks very soon, but we are moving forward with the sponsorship of a number of rinks, and that certainly is another revenue stream coming into the municipality. Approval of the park service maintenance standards. Council now has a clear understanding of what our service levels are for our parks, what it takes in order to accomplish those things, and when that work is completed, what it actually looks like. We had record attendance at our camps, at our camp programs this year. There's a partnership with the Aurora King Baseball Association regarding the maintenance of the ball diamonds at Stuart Burnett Park. We established the John West Memorial Leaders of Tomorrow Scholarship Fund, and that was presented in this chambers late in 2015. Establishment of the Tim Jones Trail, in fact, a picture of Tim in the paper this week with the new trail sign. And we are now partners with Canadian Jumpstart, and we actually funded 93 children in 2015 for a total of $18,726 excuse me. But we don't rest on our laurels, and we have many advancements and accomplishments that we want to get in 2016. Certainly want to assist council in determination and disposition for the use of those 5 buildings that I spoke about earlier: Library Square, Victoria Hall, the Armory, and the Petch House. We also want to advance the recommendations coming from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We want a creation and implementation of public art policy. Councillor Abel talked about a public art policy earlier. We would like to move forward with a public art policy and present that to council along with a funding model associated with that. Implementation and recommendations coming out of our cultural master plan, and ongoing discussions and negotiations regarding land and acquisitions for parkland purposes. We still are looking at whatever lands we can purchase in order to meet our recreational needs, which are, as I say, going to be identified in our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We're planning on updating and reviewing our departmental pricing policy. We implemented a short-term and long-term plan for the Aurora collection. We want to move that forward in 2016, and we want to move advancement and recommendations from the cultural precinct plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's the end of my presentation, and I'll await questions.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. May I please first have a motion to receive Mr. Downey's presentation, please? Councillor Thompson and Councillor Kim. Comments or questions for Mr. Downey, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Through to Mr. Downey, going to our agenda notes, 6-14. You identify that one of the key changes for the 2016 budget is a loss in a decrease in planned recreation program revenues. And so, I guess, if you could just give a little bit of background. I thought that when we went through the 2015 budget process, we had identified the fact that there would be a loss in revenue as a result of the leisure complex being offline for a few months. So is this a further loss in revenue that you're predicting for 2016, even though we now have a full year of the leisure complex? I'm just trying to understand why you're anticipating a decrease in planned recreation program revenues for 2016.
Mr. Downey, please.
Through Mr. Mayor, that's more about repositioning with regards to the 2016 budget. The 2016 budget actually has increased program revenues in some areas and decreased program areas in other areas, but overall we are going through a planned decrease. Our revenues, for instance, within a fitness area are lower than we had projected. We had projected a full year of fees for 2015. However, the facility didn't open until March, so we didn't meet that target. However, we are offsetting some of those costs with increased fees for our camp programs. We had an extremely good program, a camp program, certainly from a revenue perspective, and so we are increasing those. But overall, within the town budget, we are looking at decreased program revenues, and the majority of that has to do with our lost revenues or our lower revenues than anticipated with the leisure complex.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and my question is for Mr. Downey as well, obviously. I was looking through the attachments and just tried to find it quickly, but you mentioned it briefly with in the achievement section of your presentation with respect to the facility sponsorship. I just want to know, what are is the total, if you could quantify it, dollars that we get in revenue for facility sponsorship?
Mr. Downey?
And
do you
that
have
includes as well everything, from rink boards to, I didn't see it, it's probably too small a number to be in the chart, but.
I can give it to you if you just give me one moment, please. Business support. Pardon? Pardon? No, he wants, excuse me, he wants not only for the rinks, but all sponsorship. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the sponsorship target for 2016 is $48,735.
And that includes the newly sponsored rinks?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it includes 3 of those, not 4. The other sponsorship that we receive is not identified within this single sponsorship line, but we have sponsorship for our special events, which falls within the special events line, and we have sponsorship for our leisure guide, which falls within the leisure guide line. So if you wanted a consolidated sponsorship number for the entire department, I'd give that to you, but not readily.
Thank you, and I guess the reason I ask is, I can ask a 2-part question, and I'll just give the floor back to you, is I'd like to know what your challenges that you face or that you seem to face in increasing revenue for facility sponsorship, and I'd like to maybe just get your thoughts briefly on how you think you can improve that number.
See, Mr. Mayor, I think the trend towards electronic or use of social media and electronic versions of many of the documents we send out, I think there'll be a time when we aren't going to be mailing out leisure guides, because people are mostly going to their computers in order to get that information. So we're looking at how we transition from that. So printed media is getting less attractive for us. The other area that we're looking at certainly increasing is people want name recognition. That's why sponsorship and name sponsorship, I believe, is going to be something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of. People would like to see their name attached to certain things. They certainly want to be attached to something that has a good market or a good feel towards that. So I believe those are the 2 main trends that we have to start moving towards, and moving away from our traditional methods of putting out calendars or leisure guides or a number of our printed material. I don't believe that we're going to be getting the uptake for sponsorship as we have in the past.
Thank you, and I just wanted to make a comment on that. I just think there's a huge potential for growth, in my opinion, in revenues from facility sponsorship. It's growing throughout the province, it's growing throughout the entire country, and I think Aurora really needs to be ahead of the curve when it comes to capitalizing on that trend. Other municipalities are doing that. Some similar size to Aurora, Whitby, for instance, is doing an excellent job in increasing their facility sponsorship revenues, and I really think it's an asset to not only move the town forward, but to also help out on the operating costs.
Thank you, Councillor. Other speakers, Mr. Downey. Councillor Maracus and Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 3 to Mr. Downey. In tab 6, page 12 of our budget, just looking at the other costs and grass cutting, and I see that we've gone up 63, almost 64%. I'm just wondering why. Do we have that much more grass?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with regards to contracts?
Yes.
Yes. So we're getting more areas, and we're not hiring additional staff, so we're increasing our contracted services.
Okay, thank you. I guess just a comment. I mean, I think that there's ways we can look for efficiencies within the grass cutting, not this year, but I think in the future, as far as maybe moving to a more environmentally friendly ways instead of using sod. And I think that's something that we'll probably be bringing up at EAC, looking at xeriscaping within the boulevards where we don't need to do grass cutting anymore. So I think that will be coming hopefully forward in the future.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following on that page 12, under other, it's a 42% increase. Is there anything in particular that added to that? Oh, sorry, the other is under program materials.
I apologize. I do not know what other, or what is represented in other. So
Neither
I
do
will have
I.
to get back to you. No, that's not a problem. I'll have to get back to you with that.
Thank you. My second question is on, in section 3 of the KPIs, under operating costs of providing rec programs.
Excuse me, Councillor, could you give us a page reference?
I'm back at 3, page 1, section 3, page 1, but I need to use that figure here. It says operating costs of providing rec programs per town resident. There is no figure for 2014. And then on page 11 here, when it says participant hours, registered programs annually, there's no participant hour for 2015. So I'm missing a link. I know that the Family Leisure Complex was closed, but I don't understand why in one case we have 2014 and in one case 2015. They're different variables, but I would have thought the years would have lined up.
Through Mr. Chair, with regards to 611, the participant hours for registered programs, we haven't completed that because we haven't completed 2015, and when we have 2015, we will then be placing a number in there. We didn't want to prorate it, so we haven't identified the number of participant hours until the completion of 2015, which is the reason that number is not in there.
Thank you. And okay, that's good enough for now. Thank you. Unless Mr. Elliott has anything to add. Because NA usually means not applicable.
I'm looking at 3, Mr. Chair, on page 3.1 that you referenced, the blank box for 2014. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what transpired there. We'll take a look at that and see if there's a number to fill in there.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Elliott, NA usually means not applicable, but obviously it is. So
Or not available.
So in this case, it's not available?
Right.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Downey? Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And on the page that we have on our screen, bullet 4, development of our first sports plan, is that the sports tourism plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that's the sports plan. The sports tourism plan is being dealt through the CAO's office.
Thank you. Could you just elaborate then on briefly what the difference is?
Certainly. The sports plan, if you recall, when it came forward to council, we had identified 7 strategies with regards to the provision and development of sports within the municipality. The consultant, Monteith Brown, has been engaged to do that alongside of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and both documents are coming forward to council in early January.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments for Mr. Downey, please? Okay, so all in favor, please? Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're going to play follow the bouncing ball, actually. I'm going to speak to my department, but I'm also going to speak to the administration department on behalf of the interim CAO. So if you would permit, I'm going to go through both sets of slides and then attempt to field your questions, first on mine and then subsequent to the administration department. So services we deliver in our area, we've got our budget management and financial reporting group doing short and long-term financial planning, internal and external reporting, cash flow and investment management, and financial support for all of our internal client departments. Treasury and Accounting Services does the day-to-day accounting, including payroll and accounts payable and all of our bookkeeping. Our Revenue Services administers the tax and the water accounts, looking after the client accounts, pre-authorized payments, mortgage payments, billings, and escalated inquiries from the front desk. We have frontline IT service and support. Our business and internal clients rely on us to keep their applications and systems running on a daily basis. We have a very strong uptime of our network, and our clients, that's our help desk for IT. We also do IT project support and our IT network infrastructure. So those are the services that we deliver in our group. In 2015, we worked with our new Finance Advisory Committee. We updated our investment policy. We have new council budget principles, process, and directives documents. And in the coming week or so, we are starting a pilot of our paperless billings for water. During 2016, you'll see that we're looking to expand that into tax as well. But for now, we're on a small pilot for water billings. We have the capability. We just want to make sure that it works, and then we'll be rolling that out early 2016. We have configured and tested our new cloud HR payroll solution, and it's a go live for Jan 1, and we're excited to capture the efficiencies that that new system and process will give us. We've updated the foundation of our internal intranet so that our client departments can populate that. That was a lot of work, and our database manager has been working on that very specifically using some newer technology, and we hope to improve our collaboration capabilities internally, as well as ready reference to the most current version of the truth, as it were. What's the current policy on? What's the most recent version of this? And so we look forward to the efficiencies that by nature will bring about for the corporation. We've established a banking and checkout facility for our website for e-commerce capability. That is in process and in place. Sorry, not in process. It's in place, awaiting the development of our e-commerce modules that we could sell, whether it dog tags or anything else, through our website. We have the capability for checkout and banking for that. We have also modified the 2016 budget approach, and clearly we're in the midst of that right now. For 2016, in our finance group, we look forward to, again, reintroducing multi-year budgeting. For 2017, other budget process changes to help improve the accountability of the corporation, the accountability of our departments to you, but also yourselves to our community, and streamline the budget preparation, but also the review cycle and approval. We also look forward, as I mentioned earlier, the implementation of e-billings for water, and to develop the same capability for tax, and that we look forward to reducing paper, labor, and costs. So those are the strategic advancements for our finance group. As to, thank you. Sorry, Samantha, thank you. As to the administration services, speaking on behalf of the interim CAO, the departmental functions, there's 4 groups. The executive management is the office of the CAO, doing all of the corporate leadership, the efficient administration of the corporation, the key liaise for council, the strategic planning, and implementation of all council decisions and policies. Corporate communications is a group that reports to the CAO. They look after the communication strategies, the marketing services, media relations, web services, and social media. A growing environment, as you can imagine. The Human Resources Services also is a department with a manager that reports to the CAO. They look after all the policies and guidelines, the staff retention, the recruitments, training, development, health and safety, employee and labor relations, and they also look after and facilitate the Employee Assistance Program, which is a third-party program for staff. We also have a manager of special projects. His key functions include performance measurement, the emergency management planning and execution, as well as excellence matters initiatives, and our continuous improvement and innovation, and making sure that the corporation is always being challenged to find new and innovative ways of delivering our services at or at a better cost. In 2015, the achievements in this area, we completed a tourism strategy which was presented to Council in August. Our Excellence Matters team has made significant innovative progress towards a silver certification by Excellence Canada, a third-party organization that audits us for our achievements and commitments in this regard, commitments to continuous improvement. We have a new employee onboarding program launched by our Human Resources. The goal of this program is to strengthen our employee retention. If we do a great job bringing a person into the organization, we've gone a long way to keeping that person as a long-term employee. The strategic plan, we've developed a work plan for that. Budgets and timelines have been approved by Council just recently, and that strat plan update will be completed in Q1 16. And we completed a comprehensive study to explore shared services and collaboration amongst the N6 municipalities, and I believe a report was presented back in May or June by the former CAO. In 2016, the achievements planned, the strategic advancements planned, is to obtain that silver level certification from Excellence Canada. We're currently certified at the bronze level. We have to step it up, and wanted to step it up because this is a signal to the community that we are committed to continuously improve ourselves, our business processes, and our deliverables, and our cost efficiency. We are looking to develop a more robust wellness program focusing specifically on mental health and stress issues. These are growing and very difficult to control issues in the workplace across the country and the continent, and we are looking to improve our wellness program, again, hoping to reduce lost days to that, to those particular issues. We have a strategic plan update planned for completion early 2016, as I mentioned earlier. We're looking to assist, it's tough, but we're looking to assist business owners with the creation of a business improvement area in downtown Aurora. It's important to understand that the business improvement area has to be driven by the business owners. We can only simply assist and facilitate that, but we cannot force it to happen. The owners need to be party to it. We are also looking to update the corporate communications strategy and communications policies. That will come in sometime during 2016 with a refill of the manager of communications on a permanent basis. And we're looking to investigate options to more actively engage the community. We've heard it from Council many times, looking to engage the community on key issues, key considerations, decisions facing Council through the establishment of a customer council in Aurora. And a customer council would be a group of, perhaps we call out and ask for 500 people that would be willing to provide their comments on issues. And we would put out a call, whether it's for budget, send it out by email, ask for their response and feedback, and the first 500 responses are eligible to win a prize or get entered to a draw or whatever. But either way, this creates a pool of diverse interests of the community to represent and to provide Council with direct feedback on specific issues. So those are the strategic advancements for the 2016. I'd be happy to field questions first from my own area, and then perhaps between the interim CAO and myself, we can help address any questions on the second part.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Motion first to receive, Councillors Gartner and Thompson. I'd go to my councillors on the left here, but they're all busy eating lollipops. I don't know. Seems to be kind of biased over there to sweets. Questions for Mr. Elliott, please. First of all, to his presentation, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. I hope Mr. Elliott doesn't mind, but I'm just going to skip to the administration questions for myself. With regards to the bullet point, with regards to the creation of a BIA, I know that that was on last year's 2015 strategic advancements, and it may have been on 2014. So I guess, you know, I don't know if Mr. Moyle can answer or not, but I mean, have we made any advancement? Because my understanding is that really the downtown merchants really haven't expressed the desire to start it up just yet.
Mr. Moore.
I received a briefing from Jim Kyle, who has carriage of the file a few weeks ago, and he indicated that, as the treasurer indicated, that this is an organization which could be created, but it requires the affected property owners to agree to be part of a BIA. So essentially a BIA does a number of things. It does sort of joint marketing for the community, so it's a marketing program to promote activities in the downtown core. It's also a self-directed form of tax for improvements of street furniture and parts of the municipal road allowance. Some municipalities, some business owners like the notion of creating a BIA and having the self-directed tax, and others not so much. My understanding is that there have been a series of meetings that have taken place with town staff and the potential members of the BIA, and the way this was described to me, it still was very much a work in progress. And I'm told that when there is progress being made, it will be obviously brought back to council for your consideration. But the key thing is this is something that has to be driven by the business owners and not driven by the town. I've had experience again in other places where municipalities try to be the driver of creating a BIA, and it's often met with a fair amount of resistance because it's really not the taxpayers' money which is being impacted here. It's money being collected by the individual property owners for their own particular purposes, be it marketing or street furniture improvements. So it requires, and finally, it often requires a champion or two on the part of people in the downtown area to advance this. The municipality essentially is the tax collector, but the governance and the program is really established by a co-op effort of the business owners.
Councillor?
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments, and I fully recognize the value of a BIA in the downtown of Aurora. I guess my challenge is I keep seeing it as a key initiative or a key objective to achieve, and yet it doesn't seem that we're making some progress. I mean, it's been a couple of years now that it's been on the books, and so I guess my concern is that you know, the public sees it as us continuing to say this is something we want to achieve, but yet it's not forming. And so I just don't want to give people the impression that we've failed to be able to move this forward. And as long as it's there, it concerns me. As long as there's progress, that's one thing. But I guess that's just the challenge. And so that's just my perspective.
If I may, Councillor Thompson, because I'm also on that committee, and I've been to, we had a meeting 2 weeks ago with the core group, and there's about a half a dozen people who are actively interested in moving this forward. So they've agreed to establishing a boundary, and Mr. Kyle will be following up with all the business owners in that area. But as you can, it's a bit of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So we are working on it, but it has to be very much taken up by the.
That's fantastic. As long as there's progress, and I don't.
Yep.
It doesn't matter to me whether it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or it's baby steps. As long as we're making progress, I think that's great, and then that's enough to keep it on the plate for strategic advancements.
I would say we are making progress.
I think the other one is that I like to see the fact that the customer council is something that we're going to give consideration. I know Mr. Moyles commented before on the success it had in other municipalities, and he's the one that put forward that idea, and I think it'll serve us well here in Aurora if we're able to establish it.
Other speakers, please. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't exactly want to speak to this, but I see that Mr. Rouleau's in the audience, and I'm just wondering which hat he's wearing tonight and
3 hats.
exactly why he's here.
He's here to
I'm
answer
sure
the
he has
question.
something else to do. I beg your pardon?
Sorry. I'd asked him to attend if there were questions around corporate communications. He's taken an active role, obviously, on that project. And if there are any questions about the corporate communications strategy, the update, he's certainly here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Then I'd just like to know if there, if we have or are developing a new communication strategy.
Mr. Real, would you care to come down, join us? Chair there. At the podium, sir?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Our plan is to do an assessment of the corporate communications function, looking at what our customers or our stakeholders expect, what services we're delivering, what other municipalities or other similar type organizations are delivering in terms of services. We plan to look at best practices as well, and the function has committed to coming back to council through a council workshop to discuss sort of a way to move forward in terms of optimizing corporate communication. So our plan is to do this assessment through the next few months, leading into a discussion with council in January on the findings of that analysis